I'll never forget the sound my keys made when they hit the floor, that metallic clatter echoing through my son's empty house, empty except for the crumpled body I found lying at the bottom of the stairs. My business trip to Seattle had been cut short by a canceled client meeting, so I'd caught an earlier flight home. I was exhausted, dragging my carry-on behind me, thinking maybe I'd surprise Marcus and Amanda with some good Thai food for dinner. I still had the spare key they'd given me months ago. For emergencies, they'd said. The house was completely dark when I walked in, dark at 4:30 on a Tuesday afternoon. Something felt wrong immediately. "Marcus?" I called out. My voice sounded too loud in the silence. No answer. That's when I saw the note, taped right there on the banister. White printer paper with my son's messy handwriting scrawled across it. "Mom, had to leave town for a few days. Emergency. Deal with this yourself. Do not call us. We're done." Deal with what? Then I saw her. Eleanor. Lying in a heap at the base of the staircase, one arm twisted beneath her at an angle that made my stomach turn. Her silver hair, usually so perfectly styled, was matted and disheveled. The beautiful cashmere sweater I'd given her for Christmas was stained. Her lips were cracked, bleeding. "Oh my God, Eleanor!" I dropped everything and ran to her, my heart hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. Her eyes fluttered open. Just barely. "Kate?" The word came out as nothing more than a whisper. "I'm here. I'm right here." My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone. "What happened? How long have you been lying here? I'm calling 911. But her hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. Her grip was weak but desperate, urgent. "Wait," she whispered. "Not yet. Listen to me first. Eleanor, you need an ambulance. You need a hospital. I need you to help me teach them a lesson." Her blue eyes locked onto mine, and despite everything, the dehydration, the pain, the 3 days she'd been lying there alone, those eyes were sharp, clear, furious. "They don't know I own everything they have. Everything." My blood went cold. "What are you talking about? Marcus and Amanda, what did they do?" "This house, the cars, the credit cards they've been maxing out." She coughed, and I could see the pain ripple across her face. "All mine. They've been trying to kill me, Kate." I stared at this woman, my ex-husband's stepmother, the woman who'd helped me raise my son when his father walked out, who'd shown up to every school play and baseball game and birthday party. The woman who'd been nothing but generous and kind. "Get rid of this useless sack of shit." I suddenly noticed there was more written on the back of the note. My hands were shaking so badly I almost couldn't turn it over. Amanda's handwriting. Vicious. Detailed. Explaining exactly how they'd left Eleanor here with no food, no water, no phone, how they'd locked her in, how they were just waiting for her to finally croak so they could get their hands on everything. "How long?" My voice cracked. "Eleanor, how long have you been here?" 3 days. She closed her eyes. No water. They took my phone, locked my bedroom door from the outside. I fell trying to get downstairs to find help. 3 days. My son, had left a 72-year-old woman to die alone in the dark for 3 days. But here's what you need to understand. Eleanor wasn't just any elderly woman. She was one of the sharpest legal minds I'd ever known. A former corporate attorney who'd spent 40 years winning impossible cases, and when she opened her eyes again and looked at me, I didn't see a victim. I saw a warrior. "Help me up," she said, her voice stronger now, "and then help me destroy them." Have you ever discovered that someone you love, someone you raised, someone you would die for, is capable of something so monstrous you can barely breathe? That's what I was facing in that moment. But to understand what I did next, I need to take you back to the beginning. Because what happened in that house, what Marcus and Amanda had been doing for months, what Eleanor and I were about to do to stop them, it's a story you won't believe. Let me tell you how this all started. My name is Catherine Morrison, but everyone calls me Kate. I'm 52 years old, and I've spent the last 25 years building a career in pharmaceutical marketing that I'm genuinely proud of. 6 months ago, I was promoted to vice president, a position that came with a significant salary increase and, unfortunately, a lot of travel. I'm divorced, have been for 8 years now. My ex-husband, Richard, walked out when our son Marcus was 20, claiming he needed to find himself. Last I heard, he was living in Arizona with wife number 3. We don't talk. Marcus is my only child. My whole world, really. I raised him essentially alone, working my way up from entry-level positions while making sure he had everything he needed. Every soccer practice, every parent-teacher conference, every milestone. I was there. And when Richard's stepmother, Eleanor Whitmore, stepped in to help after the divorce, I was grateful beyond words. She'd been married to Richard's father for 15 years before he passed away. She had no obligation to stay in our lives, but she did. She showed up for Marcus when her own stepson couldn't be bothered. Eleanor was 72 years old, elegant, sharp as a tack. She'd retired from a prestigious Manhattan law firm 12 years earlier, and she'd done very well for herself. Her late husband had left her comfortable, and her own investments had grown substantially. She owned the beautiful Greenwich estate where she'd lived for decades, plus investment properties in Manhattan and Boston. She was everything I hoped to be at her age: independent, financially secure, still vital and engaged with life. 18 months ago, Eleanor had a health scare. Nothing serious, just some irregular heartbeats that frightened her enough to reconsider living alone in that big house. She was 71 then, and for the first time, I saw vulnerability in her eyes. Marcus called me, excited. "Mom, I've been thinking. Amanda and I have that huge house with the separate in-law suite. Grandma Eleanor shouldn't be living alone anymore. What if she moved in with us?" I remember feeling this warm rush of pride. My son, being responsible, being caring. "That's wonderful, Marcus," I'd said. She'd love that, and honestly, it would ease my mind knowing she's not alone. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that Marcus was already drowning in debt. The house he'd bought 2 years earlier? Eleanor had co-signed the mortgage, the BMW in their driveway, financed under her credit, the consulting business he kept talking about starting, funded by $85,000 she'd transferred to him. Eleanor moved in that April. I helped her pack, and I remember how happy she seemed. "It'll be nice to have young people around again," she'd said, carefully wrapping her crystal collection. "Marcus has always been such a sweet boy." Sweet boy. God, if only I'd known. The first few months seemed perfect. Marcus posted photos on social media constantly: family dinners, Eleanor smiling in their garden, Amanda giving her a manicure. "Blessed to care for our matriarch," one caption read. I even commented heart emojis. I was traveling constantly for my new position. Seattle, Chicago, Boston, sometimes gone for a week at a time. I'd call Eleanor every few days, and she always said everything was wonderful. Her voice was bright, cheerful. Looking back now, I can pinpoint exactly when things started changing. It was October, 6 months after she'd moved in. I'd stopped by unannounced with Thai takeout, Eleanor's favorite, and Amanda answered the door with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Kate, we didn't know you were coming." "I was in the neighborhood, thought I'd surprise you. Is Eleanor around?" "She's resting. She's been very tired lately." Something in Amanda's tone felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on what. I went upstairs anyway. Eleanor was sitting in her suite by the window, and she looked smaller somehow, thinner. Her usually vibrant presence seemed dimmed. "Eleanor, you feeling okay?" She turned to me with a smile that seemed to take effort. "Of course, dear. Just a little under the weather." "Have you seen Dr. Chen?" "Amanda took me last week. Everything's fine." But her voice lacked conviction. I should have pushed. I should have asked more questions. Instead, I let it go. Over the next several months, I started noticing other things. Small things that didn't quite add up, but I kept dismissing them. Eleanor mentioned she couldn't find her checkbook. Marcus laughed it off. "You know how forgetful she's getting, Mom. It'll turn up." Forgetful? Eleanor had one of the sharpest minds I knew. She could recite case law from 30 years ago. Her car, that beautiful Mercedes she'd barely put miles on, suddenly got sold. Amanda explained that Eleanor didn't feel comfortable driving anymore. We helped her sell it. The money went straight into her account. I asked Eleanor about it during one of our phone calls. "Oh, yes," she said quietly. "It seemed like the right decision." But something in her voice didn't sound convinced. It sounded resigned. Then Dorothy stopped calling. Dorothy Chen, not related to Eleanor's doctor, had been Eleanor's closest friend for 30 years. They'd worked together at the firm, traveled together, had lunch every week. "We had a falling out," Eleanor told me when I asked. "She was being nosy about my finances. Can you imagine?" That bothered me. Dorothy wasn't the nosy type. She was protective of Eleanor. Why would she suddenly start prying? Thanksgiving came. I hosted at my condo downtown, and when Eleanor arrived with Marcus and Amanda, I barely recognized her. Her clothes hung loose on her frame. Her hands trembled slightly when she reached for her water glass. The vibrant woman I'd known looked fragile, diminished. "Eleanor, have you been eating enough?" I asked quietly while Marcus and Amanda were in the kitchen. "Oh yes, Amanda makes wonderful meals." But her eyes didn't meet mine. When I hugged her goodbye that night, I could feel her ribs through her sweater. Sharp, prominent. I pulled Marcus aside before they left. "Your grandmother looks thin. Is she okay?" He laughed. Actually laughed. "She's fine, Mom. She's just getting older, you know. Besides, Amanda takes amazing care of her. You worry too much." Maybe I did worry too much. That's what I told myself on the plane to Seattle 3 days ago. Marcus was 28 years old, a grown man. He'd loved his grandmother. Everything was fine, except it wasn't fine. Because while I was working late in hotel rooms and attending pharmaceutical conferences, Marcus and Amanda were systematically destroying Eleanor, isolating her, manipulating her, stealing from her. They'd convinced her to add Marcus to all her bank accounts, just in case of emergency. Then they'd started draining them, 1,500 here, 3,000 there, cash advances on credit cards they'd opened in her name without her knowledge. They'd taken her phone multiple times, claiming it needed repairs, preventing her from calling friends or her attorney. They'd intercepted her mail by filing a change of address form, rerouting everything to a P.O. box they controlled so she couldn't see her bank statements. They'd started crushing sleeping pills into her dinner, keeping her drowsy and compliant. And 3 days before I found her, they'd decided to take it one step further. They told Eleanor they were going on a romantic getaway. Could she manage alone for a few days? Then they'd hidden her medications, taken her phone, locked her bedroom door from the outside. Accidentally, they'd claim later. Left her with nothing but a box of stale crackers and no water. They'd calculated that by the time I returned from Seattle in 5 days, it would be too late. An elderly woman with a heart condition, alone, fallen down the stairs? Tragic accident. So sad. These things happen. They'd inherit everything. The house they already lived in would be legally theirs. The investment properties, the portfolio, everything. 8.5 million reasons to let a 72-year-old woman die of dehydration in the dark. But Marcus made one critical mistake. One miscalculation that would cost him everything. He assumed I wouldn't come home early. And now, kneeling beside Eleanor on that cold floor, listening to her whisper her plan through cracked lips, I realized something that broke my heart and steeled my resolve at the same time. My son had become a monster, and I was going to help his grandmother make absolutely certain he paid for it. The paramedics arrived within 7 minutes, though it felt like hours. 2 of them, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a younger guy who moved with efficient purpose. They stabilized Eleanor, checked her vitals, asked questions I could barely focus on answering. How long has she been without water? 3 days. The words tasted like poison in my mouth. The lead paramedic looked at me sharply. 3 days? Where was her family? That's complicated, I managed to say. They wanted to transport Eleanor immediately, but she, even dehydrated and injured, was remarkably insistent. I'm going, she told them firmly. But I need 5 minutes alone with my granddaughter-in-law first. They weren't happy about it, but Eleanor had spent 40 years convincing people to do things her way. 5 minutes later, they were outside preparing the gurney, and Eleanor was gripping my hand with surprising strength. My study, she whispered urgently. 3rd bookshelf from the left, behind the collected Shakespeare volumes. There's a false panel. Eleanor, what are you? A blue folder. Everything's in there. Take it before they come back. Hide it somewhere safe. She gestured weakly toward her designer handbag lying near the stairs. And in my purse, there's a key. Silver with a red tag. Safe deposit box at Chase Bank on Riverside. Box 347. I stared at her. How long have you been planning this? Her smile was grim, determined. 4 months, since I figured out what they were doing. You knew? Eleanor, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you? Because I needed proof, Kate. You're a mother. If I'd just told you Marcus was stealing from me, what would you have done? I opened my mouth to protest, then stopped. She was right. I would have confronted him. He would have denied everything. Amanda would have backed him up. And some part of me, God help me, probably would have wanted to believe them. I need you to trust me, Eleanor continued. I was an attorney for 40 years. I know how this works. We need documentation, evidence, not just my word against theirs. The paramedics were calling from outside. I ran to the study, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. Found the Shakespeare volumes, Hamlet, Macbeth, King Lear, and felt behind them until I heard a soft click. The false panel swung open, revealing a blue folder stuffed with papers. I grabbed it, shoved it deep into my laptop bag, and ran back. I've got it. Good girl. Eleanor's eyes were already closing, exhaustion taking over now that she'd accomplished what she needed to. Now listen carefully. Here's what we're going to do. At the hospital, they admitted Eleanor for severe dehydration, malnutrition, and a fractured wrist from the fall. The ER doctor, Dr. Sarah Rodriguez, her name tag read, pulled me aside with questions that felt like accusations. Has your grandmother been receiving proper care at home? She's my ex-husband's stepmother, but yes. I stopped. I thought she was. Because her condition suggests extended neglect. We're talking about dehydration that could have been fatal if you'd found her even 12 hours later. Dr. Rodriguez's expression was hard, professional, but clearly angry. I need to report this to Adult Protective Services. It's protocol with elderly patients showing signs of abuse or neglect. Wait, I started, but Eleanor interrupted from the bed. That won't be necessary, doctor. I have a complicated family situation that I'm handling with my attorney, but I do appreciate your concern. Dr. Rodriguez looked skeptical, but nodded. I'm documenting everything in your chart regardless. You'll need to stay at least 48 hours for observation and rehydration therapy. After she left, I pulled a chair close to Eleanor's hospital bed. My hands were still shaking. Okay, tell me everything. And she did. It had started slowly, she explained. Small requests from Marcus that seemed reasonable at the time. Could he borrow $5,000 for a business opportunity? Could she co-sign on the house because his credit wasn't quite good enough yet? Could she help with just one car payment? I said yes every time, Eleanor said, her voice thick with emotion I'd never heard from her before. He's my grandson. He's all I have left of my late husband's family. I wanted to help him succeed. But the requests got bigger, more frequent, And Marcus started talking about her age, her memory, how she should really let him help manage her finances since she was getting confused. That's when I got suspicious, Eleanor said, because my memory is perfect. I still do the New York Times crossword every morning. I can cite case precedents from 1985, but he kept insisting I was forgetting things, mixing things up. So she'd started paying attention. Really paying attention. Checking her bank statements online when Marcus and Amanda were at work. Noticing withdrawals she hadn't authorized, transfers she hadn't made. She'd contacted her attorney, James Whitmore, who'd handled her legal affairs for decades, using a neighbor's phone while Marcus and Amanda were out. James helped me understand what was happening, she said quietly. They'd been forging my signature on checks, taking cash advances on credit cards they'd opened in my name, transferring money out of my investment accounts in amounts just small enough not to trigger immediate red flags. My stomach turned. How much? Over 4 months? $380,000. I felt like I'd been punched. Jesus, Eleanor, we need to go to the police. We will, but not yet. She shifted in the hospital bed, wincing. Because they're trying to have me declared mentally incompetent. The room seemed to tilt. What? She explained that Marcus had been scheduling doctor's appointments without her full knowledge, telling physicians she was confused, forgetful, possibly showing early signs of dementia. He'd been building a paper trail of concerning incidents, all fabricated or exaggerated. He'd even contacted an attorney about establishing guardianship. If they succeed, they get control of everything. My estate, my medical decisions, everything. And there's nothing I can do to stop it once a judge signs the order. But you're clearly not incompetent. Any doctor can see that. Can they? Eleanor's voice was bitter. After months of Marcus telling them I'm declining? After they've created documentation of me forgetting things, getting confused? Kate, they've been playing the long game. I thought about all the times Marcus had mentioned Eleanor's forgetfulness to me. How he'd said she wasn't safe to drive anymore. How her friend Dorothy had become too nosy about finances and had to be cut off. They've been isolating you, I said, the full picture finally becoming clear. Cutting you off from anyone who might notice what they're doing. Exactly. And 3 days ago, they decided to accelerate their timeline. She told me about that final dinner. Amanda had made chicken piccata, Eleanor's favorite. The wine had tasted slightly bitter, she'd noticed, but she'd drunk it anyway. Within an hour, she'd felt overwhelmingly drowsy and had gone upstairs to lie down. When she woke up 12 hours later, disoriented and confused from whatever they'd given her, her bedroom door was locked from the outside. I thought it was a mistake at first, she said, and I could hear the fear she'd felt, even though she was trying to stay composed. I called out. No one answered. I tried my phone. Gone. I tried the door. Locked solid. And that's when I realized what was happening. She'd heard them downstairs that morning, packing suitcases. Heard Amanda laugh about something. Heard Marcus say, "By the time your mother gets back, it'll be over. We'll tell her we came home and found her." Heart attack. So tragic. Eleanor had spent the next 2 days trying to conserve her energy, rationing the sleeve of crackers they'd left on her nightstand, attempting to break down the door. Finally, desperate and weak, she'd managed to pick the lock using a hairpin, a skill she'd apparently learned in college, and had tried to make it downstairs to find a phone. That's when she fell. "I thought I was going to die on those stairs," she whispered. "I really thought that was it. And all I could think was how angry I was, not scared, angry, because they were going to get away with it." I was crying now, holding her hand. "I'm so sorry, Eleanor. I'm so sorry I didn't see this sooner. Don't apologize. Help me. Help me make sure they face real consequences." I wiped my eyes and nodded. "Tell me what to do." She smiled then, a fierce, strategic smile that reminded me she'd been one of Manhattan's toughest litigators. "First, we document everything with Dr. Rodriguez and my regular physician. Then we go to that safe deposit box. Then we call James, and then Kate. Then we set a trap they'll never see coming. That night, after Eleanor was settled and resting with IV fluids dripping steadily into her arm, I went back to my condo and opened the blue folder. Inside was 4 months of meticulous documentation that made my blood run cold. Bank statements with withdrawals highlighted in yellow. Copies of forged signatures, Eleanor's real signature on one side, the obvious forgeries on the other. Screenshots of text messages between Marcus and Amanda discussing how to handle the Eleanor problem. Photos. Eleanor had secretly taken of her locked bedroom door, of medication bottles that had been tampered with, of credit card statements showing charges she'd never authorized. There were handwritten notes, too, in Eleanor's precise script, dates, times, conversations she'd overheard, a complete timeline of abuse that read like a prosecutor's dream. And there, on the last page, was something I hadn't expected. A copy of Eleanor's will, the real one, properly executed 5 years ago. Marcus was supposed to receive $250,000 plus some family heirlooms. Not nothing, but not the bulk of the estate either. But there was a codicil added 3 months ago after Eleanor realized what they were doing. Marcus's inheritance had been reduced to $1, literally $1. And the reason was spelled out in legal language: for the betrayal of trust and financial exploitation I have endured from my grandson, Marcus Andrew Morrison. They'd tried to steal millions, and even if they'd succeeded in killing her, they would have gotten almost nothing. I spent that entire night reading through everything, and with each page, my heart broke a little more. This was my son, the baby I'd rocked to sleep, the little boy who'd cried when his father left, the teenager I'd helped with homework and driven to baseball practice. And he'd become this. But by the time the sun came up, I wasn't sad anymore. I was angry. Coldly, clearly angry. My son wanted to play games with a 72-year-old woman who'd done nothing but love and support him? Fine. But he'd forgotten something crucial. Eleanor Whitmore wasn't just any 72-year-old woman. She was a former senior partner at one of Manhattan's most prestigious law firms. A woman who'd spent decades destroying people in court who thought they were smarter than her. And now she had me. A VP who'd spent 20 years learning how to strategize, how to plan campaigns, how to win in competitive environments. Marcus and Amanda had made a fatal error. They'd underestimated both of us, and they were about to learn exactly how much that mistake was going to cost them. On day 3 of Eleanor's hospital stay, I sat across from James Whitmore in his Midtown Manhattan office, and I finally understood why Eleanor had trusted this man with her legal affairs for 40 years. James was exactly what you'd expect from someone who'd practiced law since the 1980s, silver-haired, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, with sharp gray eyes that missed absolutely nothing. He'd been Eleanor's attorney since before I even met my ex-husband. Mrs. Morrison, he greeted me with a firm handshake. Eleanor called me from the hospital. She told me everything. I'm glad you're here. Call me Kate, please. And I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. He gestured to a thick file on his mahogany conference table. The short version? Your son and his wife have stolen approximately $437,000 from Eleanor over the past 18 months, but it's significantly worse than simple theft. He spread documents across the table like he was building a legal case, which I realized he absolutely was. They started small, James explained. Legitimate gifts that Eleanor willingly gave. Birthday money. Help with a down payment. Things any grandmother might do. Then they convinced Marcus to be added to her checking and savings accounts for emergencies. That gave him legal access. But what they did with that access constitutes fraud. He showed me statement after statement. Transfers to pay Marcus's credit cards. Cash withdrawals at casinos. Payments to luxury retailers, expensive restaurants, a cryptocurrency exchange where Marcus had apparently lost thousands trying to day trade. They were living off her money while systematically convincing her she was imagining things, I said, feeling sick. Precisely, but 3 months ago they escalated. James pulled out a different set of documents. They attempted to forge Eleanor's signature on paperwork that would transfer ownership of her Greenwich property, worth approximately $4.2 million, directly to Marcus. Attempted? James's smile was grim. The title company flagged it. The signature didn't match their records. They contacted me since I'm listed as Eleanor's attorney of record. I immediately advised Eleanor, and that's when she started actively documenting everything. He showed me more papers. 3 credit cards opened in Eleanor's name, without her knowledge, $64,000 in charges. When bills came, Marcus and Amanda had intercepted them by filing a fraudulent change of address form with the post office. That's a federal crime, I said. Yes, it is. Mail fraud. They had Eleanor's statements rerouted to a P.O. box they controlled. It took Eleanor weeks to figure out why she wasn't receiving her bank statements anymore. What else? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. They nearly succeeded in transferring her investment portfolio, $2.3 million, to a new firm where Marcus claimed to have connections. Her original advisor got suspicious when the paperwork came through and contacted me directly. We stopped it just in time. James pulled out another folder. They also researched guardianship attorneys. They began building a case that Eleanor was mentally incompetent, documenting alleged incidents of confusion, memory loss, wandering. All fabricated, of course. They even hired a private physician to conduct an evaluation. Did Eleanor know about this? Not initially. But the physician they hired turned out to be ethical. When Eleanor seemed perfectly lucid during his evaluation, he questioned the narrative Marcus and Amanda had fed him. He refused to provide the incompetency diagnosis they wanted. James paused. That's when they moved to more extreme measures, leaving her to die. Yes, I believe they concluded a guardianship battle would take too long and might fail given Eleanor's obvious mental competency. So they created a scenario where Eleanor would die of apparent natural causes. Elderly woman, history of heart issues, living alone, tragic fall. It would be ruled accidental, and they'd inherit immediately. James slid one final document across the table. Eleanor's will, the legitimate one, dated 5 years ago. Eleanor's estate is divided carefully, charitable donations, bequests to longtime staff and friends, and a specific provision that if any heir contests the will or is found to have engaged in elder abuse or exploitation, they receive nothing. Marcus was in the will. He was supposed to receive $250,000 and some family heirlooms. Not the bulk of the estate, but a significant inheritance. Amanda, not being blood family, would receive nothing directly but would benefit from Marcus's share. James tapped the document. However, Eleanor added a codicil 3 months ago after she realized what they were doing. She reduced Marcus's inheritance to exactly $1 and specified why. For the betrayal of trust and financial abuse I have endured. I sat back heavily. So even if they'd succeeded, even if Eleanor had died, they wouldn't have gotten what they wanted. They would have gotten the house, since Marcus is on the deed as Eleanor co-signed, and remaining liquid assets in accounts he had access to, perhaps $500,000 total. But the Greenwich property, the investment portfolio, the life insurance policies, all of that goes elsewhere. Does Marcus know about the updated will? James's smile turned cold. No, and that's our advantage. Over the next 3 hours, James and I constructed a strategy. We had documentation of financial fraud. We had medical evidence of abuse and neglect. We had Eleanor's testimony and the video she'd recorded 3 weeks ago on a borrowed phone, a precautionary measure, in case something happens to me. I'd watched that video the night before, seeing Eleanor look directly into the camera, calmly detailing how her grandson was systematically destroying her life, explaining that if anyone was watching this, she was likely dead or incapacitated. It was one of the hardest things I'd ever witnessed. But we needed something more. We needed them to incriminate themselves. They think you're on their side, James said thoughtfully. You're Marcus's mother. Even if you're caring for Eleanor now, he probably assumes you'll ultimately believe his version of events, that you'll want to protect him. What are you suggesting? A trap. We let them come back. We let them think everything is proceeding according to their plan, and we record them. It was risky. It was brilliant. And it was exactly what Eleanor would have suggested. The next morning, I met with Dr. Patricia Chen, Eleanor's longtime physician, not to be confused with her friend Dorothy Chen. Dr. Chen was a woman in her late 50s with steel-gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd seen everything and wasn't impressed by much. I brought all the documentation, the timeline, the evidence of neglect. I need you to document officially that Eleanor is of completely sound mind, I told her. Because my son is trying to have her declared incompetent. Dr. Chen's face darkened as she reviewed the materials. I'll do better than that. I'll document the evidence of abuse and neglect. This is criminal elder abuse, Kate. Your son could go to prison for this. Good, I said, and I meant it. Dr. Chen conducted a full cognitive evaluation that afternoon. Eleanor scored in the 98th percentile for her age group. Her memory was flawless. Her reasoning was sharp. There was absolutely no evidence of cognitive decline. I'm also documenting the physical evidence, Dr. Chen said grimly. The dehydration, the malnutrition, the weight loss, the fracture sustained during a fall that occurred while she was locked in a room without food or water. This is one of the clearest cases of elder abuse I've seen in my career. From the hospital, we went to Chase Bank with the silver key. The safe deposit box contained even more evidence, original versions of documents Marcus had tried to alter, Eleanor's complete financial records going back 5 years, and additional recordings Eleanor had made on the borrowed phone. There was also a handwritten letter, sealed, addressed to me. Open this if I die before we finish this, Eleanor had written on the envelope. I didn't open it. I wasn't going to need to, because Eleanor was alive, and we were going to finish this together. Marcus and Amanda returned from the Bahamas 4 days after I found Eleanor. I know they were in the Bahamas because Amanda posted beach photos on Instagram with captions like much-needed getaway and paradise vibes. They'd charged the entire trip to one of Eleanor's credit cards. That detail was in our evidence file, too. I'd been watching the house, waiting. When their car pulled into the driveway, the BMW that was financed under Eleanor's credit, I was already inside, sitting in their living room. I'd used my spare key, just like I had the day I found Eleanor. They walked in, pulling luggage behind them, tan and relaxed, and Marcus saw me first. His face went completely white. Mom, what are you... How did you get... Surprise, I said calmly. I was sitting in the leather armchair, the one Eleanor had paid for. We need to talk. Amanda recovered faster, always the better actor. Kate, oh my God, we're so glad you're here. Something terrible happened. It's Eleanor. She's fine, I interrupted. My voice was steady, cold. She's at my condo, recovering from severe dehydration, malnutrition, and a fractured wrist she suffered while you two were enjoying the Caribbean. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Marcus's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. I don't know what you're talking about, he finally stammered. We left her with food. We thought she'd be fine for a few days. We didn't know... You left her locked in her bedroom with a box of crackers and no water for 3 days. You took her phone. You were planning to come home and discover her dead body and blame it on her age and health conditions. That's insane, Amanda said, but her voice had an edge now. She's confused, Kate. She's been having serious memory issues. We've been taking her to doctors, trying to get her help. Really? Which doctors? Because Dr. Chen has no record of any cognitive decline whatsoever. In fact, she just completed a full evaluation and found Eleanor to be of completely sound mind, sharp as she's ever been. I pulled out my phone where I'd loaded photos of key documents. Want to explain these credit card statements? The ones for cards Eleanor didn't open? Or these bank transfers, $437,000 over 18 months? Or maybe you'd like to explain the forged signature on the property deed transfer? Marcus looked like he might vomit. His tan seemed to fade right before my eyes. Amanda's expression had gone hard, calculating. If you're recording this, I'm not, I lied smoothly. The phone in my blazer pocket was recording everything. But Eleanor's attorney has all the evidence he needs. The police are involved now, Marcus. Adult Protective Services, the district attorney's office. You called the police on your own son? Marcus's voice cracked with something between disbelief and rage. You tried to murder your grandmother for her money. What did you think I would do? She's not even your family. His voice rose. She's Dad's stepmother. You don't owe her anything. And there it was, the mask completely off. You're right, I said quietly. I don't owe her anything. But she helped raise you when your father walked away. She showed up for you every single time, and you repaid her by stealing from her and trying to kill her. We weren't trying to kill her, Marcus said desperately. We needed some time away. We thought she'd be okay. We made a mistake. A mistake? You locked her in her room. You took away her phone, her medication, her water. You left her to die while you vacationed in the Bahamas on her credit card. That's not a mistake, Marcus. That's attempted murder. You can't prove that, Amanda snapped. Actually, came a voice from the doorway, we can. Eleanor stood there, leaning on a cane, with James Whitmore beside her. She looked smaller than usual, still recovering, but her voice was pure steel. This house is in my name, she continued, walking slowly into the room. The deed you tried to forge? It didn't work. Everything here belongs to me. And you're both trespassing. Marcus stared at his grandmother like he was seeing a ghost. Grandma Eleanor, please. We can explain. We made mistakes, but we love you. You left me to die, Eleanor said, each word precisely enunciated. You stole from me. You tried to have me declared incompetent so you could control my assets. And when I started figuring it out, you decided murder was easier than admitting what you'd done. We weren't trying to murder you, Amanda insisted, but her voice lacked conviction now. You locked me in my bedroom. You removed my phone. You took my medication. You left me without food or water for 3 days while you vacationed. What would you call that? No answer. Here's what's going to happen, Eleanor continued. You have 1 hour to pack personal belongings and leave this house. The cars in the driveway? Mine. The credit cards? Canceled. The bank accounts? Frozen. You will not receive 1 penny of my estate, now or ever. You can't do that, Marcus shouted. I'm your grandson. I have rights. You have the right to remain silent, said a new voice. Detective Robert Hayes stepped in from where he'd been waiting outside, badge already in hand. 2 uniformed officers flanked him. Marcus Morrison, Amanda Morrison, you're both under arrest for financial exploitation of an elderly person, forgery, identity theft, mail fraud, and attempted murder. I watched my son's face cycle through emotions, shock, denial, anger, fear, as the detective read them their rights. Amanda was already crying, mascara running down her cheeks, babbling about lawyers and mistakes and misunderstandings. But Marcus just stared at me. Mom, he said, his voice breaking. Mom, please. Don't let them do this. I'm your son. And God help me, part of me, some small, broken part, wanted to fix this, to make it better, to protect him like I always had. But then I thought of Eleanor lying at the bottom of those stairs, 3 days without water, 72 years old, and left to die alone in the dark. You stopped being my son when you decided her life was worth less than her bank account, I said. The officers handcuffed them both. Amanda was screaming now about how this was all a mistake, how they had rights, how their lawyer would fix everything. Marcus had gone silent, his face blank with shock. As they were led out to the police cars, Eleanor took my hand. Hers was trembling slightly. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for believing me, for helping me. I should have seen it sooner. You saw it when it mattered." We stood in that doorway and watched the police cars drive away, red and blue lights flashing in the late afternoon sun. Neighbors were gathering on their lawns, whispering, pointing. Let them look, I thought. Let them all see what happens when you underestimate an elderly woman who spent 40 years winning impossible legal battles. But this wasn't over. The arrest was just the beginning. What came next? The investigation, the trial, Marcus and Amanda's desperate attempts to salvage their lives. That's when Eleanor really showed them who they'd been dealing with all along. And it was absolutely spectacular. The arrest made the local news within hours. Wealthy grandmother's caregivers charged with elder abuse and attempted murder. They didn't use names initially because of privacy laws, but in our circle everyone knew. My phone exploded, texts, calls, emails. Friends I hadn't heard from in years, suddenly reaching out with variations of, "Is it true?" and, "Oh my God, Kate, are you okay?" Even my ex-husband called from Arizona, his voice tight with something between concern and accusation. "Kate, what the hell is going on? You had our son arrested?" "Your son," I said coldly, "tried to kill his grandmother for her money. Where have you been for the last 2 years, Richard?" "I send money when I can." "He's 28. There is no child support. And you've never been there for him. Maybe that's part of the problem." I hung up before he could respond. I didn't have energy for his guilt or excuses. Marcus and Amanda posted bail within 24 hours, $100,000 each. I later learned Amanda's parents had mortgaged their house to cover it. They believed their daughter's story, that this was all a terrible misunderstanding, and Eleanor was a vindictive old woman punishing them for wanting independence. They hired Bennett Crawford, a defense attorney with a reputation for taking high-profile cases and winning through aggressive tactics and media spin. He was expensive, slick, and exactly the kind of lawyer guilty people hire when they think money can buy them out of consequences. Within a week, Crawford had crafted a narrative that made my blood boil. Marcus and Amanda weren't criminals. They were devoted caregivers being victimized by a family power struggle. Eleanor was a controlling, wealthy woman who couldn't accept that her grandson wanted his own life. When they tried to set boundaries, she'd weaponized the legal system against them. "My clients are the real victims here," Crawford told Channel 7 News, standing on the courthouse steps with Marcus and Amanda flanking him, looking appropriately somber and victimized. "Ms. Whitmore is a wealthy woman accustomed to getting her way. When my clients asserted their independence, she decided to destroy them. It was a smart strategy, I had to admit. Paint the rich elderly woman as the villain. Paint the young struggling couple as sympathetic victims. Play on stereotypes about controlling elders and greedy inheritance disputes. It might have worked too, if we didn't have overwhelming evidence. James Whitmore filed a civil lawsuit parallel to the criminal charges, seeking return of all stolen funds plus damages. Every forged document, every fraudulent transfer, every piece of evidence we'd compiled. It was damning, meticulous, and impossible to refute. Eleanor took immediate action on her assets. She changed every password, every security question, every piece of account access information. She revoked every power of attorney she'd ever granted Marcus. She reclaimed full ownership of the house, had all the locks changed, and hired a property management company to handle it until she decided whether to sell. The credit cards Marcus and Amanda had been using? Canceled, with fraud charges filed for every unauthorized purchase. Their cell phones, which had been on Eleanor's family plan? Disconnected. The gym membership, the streaming services, the country club access they'd enjoyed on her dime, all gone. Within 2 weeks, they'd gone from living a luxury lifestyle to scrambling to afford rent on a modest apartment and desperately trying to finance their legal defense. "Good," Eleanor said when I showed her the financial forensics report detailing exactly how dependent they'd been on her money. Let them understand what it's like to actually support themselves. But Crawford was relentless. He filed motions challenging Eleanor's mental competency, demanding she submit to an independent psychological evaluation. He subpoenaed her medical records, searching for any scrap of evidence suggesting cognitive decline. He found nothing, because there was nothing to find. Dr. Chen testified in a preliminary hearing that Eleanor was one of the sharpest 72-year-olds she'd treated in 30 years of practice. The court-appointed psychologist agreed. Eleanor scored in the 98th percentile on cognitive assessments. Crawford pivoted quickly. If he couldn't prove Eleanor was incompetent, he'd argue that Marcus had legitimate access to her accounts and couldn't be held criminally liable for using money she'd willingly given him access to. This is a family dispute over finances, Crawford argued in court, his voice reasonable and persuasive. Not a criminal matter. My clients believed they had permission to use these accounts. There was never any intent to defraud. Jennifer Diaz, the prosecutor handling the case, was a sharp woman in her early 40s who'd built her career on elder abuse cases. She wasn't buying it. Your clients, she said icily, locked a 72-year-old woman in her bedroom and left her without food or water for 3 days while they vacationed in the Bahamas. That's not a family dispute. That's attempted murder. Alleged attempted murder. And there's no evidence that bedroom door was actually locked. Ms. Whitmore has documented memory inconsistencies. No, she hasn't, Diaz interrupted. That's what your clients told her doctors in an attempt to build a false case for incompetency. Ms. Whitmore herself has never demonstrated any cognitive issues. In fact, she documented your client's abuse in meticulous detail over 4 months. Does that sound like someone with memory problems? The preliminary hearing was intense. I sat in the gallery with Eleanor, watching as evidence was presented. Bank statements showing the systematic theft, forged signatures analyzed by handwriting experts, medical reports documenting Eleanor's condition when she was found, and the video. Eleanor's video, recorded 3 weeks before they left her to die, calmly explaining everything they'd done to her and stating clearly, "If anyone is watching this, I am likely dead or incapacitated because of my grandson's actions." The courtroom was silent when it finished playing. Even Crawford looked shaken. Judge Patricia Holbrook, a stern woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and no patience for nonsense, reviewed everything methodically. The documents, the medical evidence, the recordings. Eleanor's testimony, delivered with calm precision. I've presided over many elder abuse cases in my 20 years on the bench, Judge Holbrook said finally. But this case is particularly egregious. The level of premeditation, the exploitation of familial trust, the callous disregard for Ms. Whitmore's life and dignity. This case will proceed to trial on all charges. Marcus and Amanda looked genuinely shocked. They'd actually believed they might get the charges dropped or reduced, that their lawyer's spin would be enough. As we left the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. Eleanor handled them with the grace and precision of someone who'd spent decades in high-stakes litigation. Ms. Whitmore, do you have a statement? Yes. I want other elderly people to know that if someone you trust is exploiting you, there is help available. There are resources. There are people who will believe you and fight for you. Don't suffer in silence. Do you feel betrayed by your grandson? I feel many things. But mostly I feel determined to ensure he faces appropriate consequences for his actions. No one should be able to abuse a vulnerable person and escape accountability. Some people are saying you're being vindictive, that you're punishing your grandson for wanting independence. Eleanor's smile was cold, controlled. Those people didn't watch me nearly die of dehydration on my living room floor. Those people didn't see 4 months of documented financial fraud and psychological abuse. Those people don't matter. The evidence speaks for itself. She was magnificent, dignified, articulate, unshakable. And watching her stand up to the cameras, to the accusations, to all of it, I felt proud to be standing beside her. But the real turning point came 3 weeks later when Detective Hayes contacted us with new information. We executed search warrants on their devices, he explained in James's office, laying out printed documents, phones, laptops, tablets. We found their text messages, emails, search histories. He showed us printouts that made my stomach turn. Text messages between Marcus and Amanda discussing the Eleanor problem and how to speed things up. Internet searches for how long can elderly person survive without water, and symptoms of natural death in elderly, and undetectable ways to cause heart attacks. There was even a draft email Amanda had written but never sent to a friend. We're so close. Just a few more months and the old bitch will be gone. Then we're set for life. Marcus says the inheritance is at least $8 million. Can you imagine? We'll finally be able to live the way we deserve. They documented their own conspiracy, Hayes said, shaking his head. It's like they never considered they might get caught. Arrogance, Eleanor said quietly. They thought I was too old, too weak, too unimportant for anyone to take seriously. They thought no one would believe me over them. Well, a jury is definitely going to believe you now, Diaz said. She joined us for this meeting. With this evidence, I'm adding charges: conspiracy to commit murder, premeditated elder abuse with intent to kill. This isn't opportunistic crime anymore. This was planned, calculated, and documented by the perpetrators themselves. The trial was set for 6 weeks out. In the meantime, Eleanor did something unexpected. She gave an interview to a national news outlet that specialized in investigative journalism. She told them everything: the abuse, the theft, the attempt on her life. She showed them the evidence, the documentation, the video. The story went viral within hours. Wealthy grandmother fights back against grandson who left her to die was picked up by every major news outlet. Eleanor's face was everywhere, and so was her message. Elder abuse happens in wealthy families too. Victims can fight back, and no one should suffer in silence. The public response was overwhelming. Support poured in for Eleanor. Outrage directed at Marcus and Amanda. Calls to strengthen elder abuse laws flooded legislators' offices. Crawford tried to control the damage, claiming his clients were being tried in the court of public opinion before having their day in actual court. But public opinion doesn't determine guilt, evidence does. And we had all the evidence we needed. The night before the trial was set to begin, Eleanor and I sat in my condo with tea, preparing ourselves for what was coming. "Are you scared?" I asked. "Terrified," she admitted, "not of testifying, not of facing them in court, but of accepting that Marcus truly doesn't care that he hurt me, that he's still more concerned with avoiding consequences than acknowledging what he did." "I know," I said quietly. My own heart was breaking over the same realization. I keep hoping he'll show some remorse, some recognition of how wrong this was. He won't. Eleanor's voice was sad but certain. Because people like Marcus and Amanda don't think they did anything wrong. They think they're victims of bad luck, of being caught, of me being vindictive. They'll never accept responsibility. She was right. I knew she was right. But that didn't mean they wouldn't face consequences. Tomorrow, we'd walk into that courtroom. Tomorrow, Eleanor would tell her story to a jury. Tomorrow, justice would finally begin. And Marcus and Amanda were about to discover that underestimating Eleanor Whitmore was the biggest mistake of their lives. The courthouse was packed the morning the trial began. I'd never seen so many people crammed into a courtroom, media in the back rows, curious onlookers who'd followed the story, even some elderly advocates who'd come to support Eleanor. Marcus and Amanda sat at the defense table with Bennett Crawford, both of them dressed conservatively. Marcus wore a navy suit that made him look younger, more innocent. Amanda had on a modest gray dress, her hair pulled back, minimal makeup. Crawford's strategy was obvious. Make them look like victims, like good people caught in terrible circumstances. Eleanor sat at the prosecution table with Jennifer Diaz, wearing an elegant charcoal suit and her signature pearl earrings. Her silver hair was styled perfectly. She looked exactly like what she was, a dignified, intelligent woman who refused to be destroyed. I sat directly behind her in the gallery, close enough to offer support. Judge Holbrook entered, and we all rose. "Be seated. We're here for the matter of the state versus Marcus Morrison and Amanda Morrison. Counsel, are you ready to proceed?" "The prosecution is ready, Your Honor," Diaz said. "Defense is ready," Crawford added. The jury selection had taken 2 days. We'd ended up with 7 women and 5 men, ranging in age from 32 to 68. Several had elderly parents. That was good for us. Diaz's opening statement was powerful and direct. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about betrayal in its most cruel form. Eleanor Whitmore is a 72-year-old woman who spent 40 years as a successful attorney. She's sharp, independent, and financially comfortable. She has 1 grandson, Marcus Morrison, whom she loved deeply and supported generously throughout his life. When Marcus married the defendant, Amanda Morrison, Eleanor welcomed her into the family. When Eleanor had a minor health scare 18 months ago, Marcus and Amanda offered to let her move into their home. Eleanor accepted, believing she'd be safe and cared for by family. Instead, over the next 18 months, these defendants systematically exploited her. They stole $437,000. They forged her signature on legal documents. They opened credit cards in her name. They isolated her from friends. They tried to have her declared mentally incompetent so they could seize control of her $8.5 million estate. And when Eleanor started figuring out what they were doing, when she started gathering evidence, they decided murder was easier than facing consequences. They locked her in her bedroom. They took away her phone and her medication. They left her without food or water for 3 days while they vacationed in the Bahamas, a vacation charged to her credit card. They calculated that by the time anyone found her, she'd be dead, and they'd inherit everything. But Eleanor Whitmore survived, and now she's here to make sure justice is served. The evidence you'll see is overwhelming. Bank records, forged documents, medical reports documenting severe dehydration and malnutrition, text messages between the defendants discussing how to handle the Eleanor problem, computer searches for how long an elderly person can survive without water. These defendants didn't make a mistake. They didn't have a misunderstanding. They planned, executed, and documented their own crimes, and now they must face the consequences. Diaz sat down. The courtroom was silent. Crawford stood for his opening statement, and I had to admit he was good at his job. "Ladies and gentlemen, you've just heard a dramatic story. But that's all it is, a story. The prosecution wants you to believe that my clients, a young couple trying to start their lives together, are monsters who tried to murder an elderly woman for money. The truth is much more complicated. Marcus Morrison loved his grandmother. He invited her to live with him and his wife because he was genuinely concerned about her living alone. For 18 months, he and Amanda provided care, companionship, and support. Yes, Marcus had access to Eleanor's accounts. Eleanor gave him that access willingly because she trusted him. Yes, he used those accounts, but he believed he had permission. There was no intent to defraud. As for the incident when Eleanor was found injured, it was a tragic accident compounded by miscommunication. My clients went on a planned trip, believing Eleanor would be fine for a few days. They had no idea she would fall or be injured. They're devastated by what happened. But Eleanor Whitmore is not a helpless victim. She's a wealthy, intelligent woman who became angry when Marcus and Amanda tried to establish boundaries. She's using the legal system as a weapon in what is essentially a family dispute. The prosecution will show you bank statements and documents. But context matters. My clients made financial decisions they believed were authorized. They never intended harm, and they certainly never tried to murder anyone. I ask you to consider all the evidence carefully. Don't be swayed by emotion or dramatic storytelling. Look at the facts. And when you do, you'll see that my clients are not criminals. They're a young couple being destroyed by a vindictive elderly woman who can't accept that they wanted independence. He sat down, looking satisfied. I wanted to scream, but Eleanor's hand reached back and squeezed mine. "Watch," she whispered. "He's given us exactly the opening we need." The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. Diaz started with Dr. Patricia Chen, who testified about Eleanor's cognitive abilities and the physical condition she was in when admitted to the hospital. "In my 30 years as a physician," Dr. Chen said, "I have never seen a clearer case of elder neglect." Ms. Whitmore was severely dehydrated. Her labs showed kidney function on the verge of failure. She'd lost 23 pounds in 4 months. She had a fractured wrist from a fall sustained while trying to escape a locked room. This wasn't an elderly person declining naturally. This was systematic abuse. Crawford tried to shake her on cross-examination. "But Dr. Chen, isn't it possible Ms. Whitmore simply wasn't eating adequately on her own? That her weight loss was self-inflicted?" "No. The pattern of malnutrition combined with the circumstances of her discovery, locked in a room without food or water, indicates deliberate deprivation." "And the cognitive evaluation you performed. Couldn't someone with early dementia still score well on tests while having significant functional impairment? Not someone who documents 4 months of complex financial fraud in meticulous detail with dates, times, and specific evidence. Ms. Whitmore's cognitive function is exceptional for her age." Next came James Whitmore, who walked the jury through the financial evidence. Every forged signature analyzed and compared. Every fraudulent transfer documented with bank records. The attempted property deed transfer that was flagged by the title company. "In my 40 years practicing law," James testified, "I've handled hundreds of estate cases. This is one of the most clear-cut cases of financial exploitation I've ever encountered." Crawford tried to argue that Eleanor had given Marcus permission. James shut it down. Ms. Whitmore added Marcus to her accounts for emergencies only. Using those accounts to finance luxury purchases, gambling, and vacations is not what any reasonable person would consider authorized use. And forging her signature on a property deed? That's not a misunderstanding. That's fraud. Then came the bank manager who'd processed some of the transactions, testifying about the sudden increase in withdrawals once Marcus gained access. The title company representative who flagged the forged deed. Eleanor's investment advisor who nearly had her entire portfolio transferred to Marcus's control. Each witness added another layer to the overwhelming evidence. But the most powerful moment came when Diaz played Eleanor's video for the jury. The courtroom lights dimmed. Eleanor appeared on the screen, sitting in what I now recognized as her neighbor's living room, speaking directly to the camera. "My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I'm 72 years old, and I'm recording this because I believe my grandson Marcus Morrison and his wife Amanda are planning to kill me." Her voice was calm, methodical, like she was presenting a legal brief. "For the past 4 months, I've been documenting systematic financial abuse. They've stolen over $350,000 from my accounts. They've isolated me from friends and my attorney. They've been giving me sleeping medication without my knowledge. They're attempting to have me declared mentally incompetent so they can control my estate. I'm making this recording as insurance. If anyone is watching this, I'm likely dead or incapacitated. Please investigate my grandson. Don't let him get away with this." She listed specific incidents, dates, times, details that could only come from someone with perfect cognitive function. "I was an attorney for 40 years. I know how predators work, and I'm watching my own grandson become one. If something happens to me, please ensure justice is served." When the video ended, several jurors were crying. Marcus was staring at the table, his face pale. Amanda was whispering frantically to Crawford. "Your Honor," Crawford said, standing quickly. "That video is clearly prejudicial and was recorded under questionable circumstances." "The video was authenticated by forensic analysis," Diaz interrupted. "Date stamp verified. Ms. Whitmore's voice confirmed by audio analysis. It's evidence of her mental state and her awareness of the ongoing abuse. I'll allow it, Judge Holbrook said. Continue, Ms. Diaz. Then came Detective Hayes, who testified about the search warrant results. The text messages were read aloud in court, Marcus to Amanda. She's asking questions about the accounts. We need to move faster. Amanda to Marcus. Maybe we should just let nature take its course. She's old. How much longer can she really last? Marcus to Amanda. I looked it up. Without water, maybe 3 to 4 days depending on health. If we time it right, your mom finds her when she gets back from Seattle. The courtroom erupted. Judge Holbrook banged her gavel. Order! But the damage was done. The jury had seen the conspiracy in the defendant's own words. Crawford tried to argue context, to suggest the messages were taken out of proportion, that they were venting frustration, not planning murder. But no one was buying it. The internet search history was even worse. How long can elderly survive without water? Symptoms of death by dehydration. How to make death look natural. By the time prosecution rested, Marcus and Amanda looked destroyed. Their lawyer looked like he was regretting taking the case. Then Eleanor took the stand. Diaz walked her through everything methodically. Her background, her career, her relationship with Marcus. How excited she'd been to move in with him and Amanda. The gradual realization that something was wrong. Eleanor's testimony was perfect. Clear, detailed, emotionally controlled, but not cold. She explained how she'd started documenting everything once she understood what was happening. I'm an attorney, she said. I knew I needed evidence. I couldn't just make accusations. I had to prove what they were doing. She described the final 3 days in painful detail, waking up groggy from whatever they'd put in her wine, finding her door locked, calling for help that never came, hearing them pack their suitcases downstairs, laughing about their vacation. I spent those 3 days thinking about how I'd spent my whole life building something meaningful. My career, my financial security, my relationships. And my grandson was willing to throw all of that away, throw me away, for money. Her voice finally broke. I wasn't afraid of dying. I was heartbroken that someone I loved could do this to me. Several jurors were openly crying now. Even Judge Holbrook looked affected. Crawford's cross-examination was careful, almost gentle. He knew attacking her would backfire. Ms. Whitmore, you've testified that you documented everything. Isn't it possible you became overly suspicious? That you misinterpreted normal family interactions as sinister? No. I have bank statements showing fraudulent withdrawals. I have forged signatures on legal documents. I have text messages where they discuss letting me die. Those aren't misinterpretations. But your grandson did have authorized access to your accounts. For emergencies, not for financing gambling losses and luxury vacations. You've admitted you gave Marcus money over the years. Isn't it possible there was confusion about what was a gift versus what was theft? Eleanor looked directly at Crawford. There was no confusion when they locked me in my bedroom and left me to die. That wasn't a gift. That was attempted murder. Crawford had no response to that. The defense's case was weak. Marcus and Amanda didn't testify. Crawford wisely kept them off the stand. They called character witnesses who testified that Marcus and Amanda were good people, that they'd seemed devoted to Eleanor. But character witnesses couldn't explain away bank records and text messages plotting someone's death. Closing arguments came on day 7 of the trial. Diaz was powerful. Ladies and gentlemen, the defense wants you to believe this is a complicated family dispute. It's not complicated. These defendants stole, they lied, they isolated a vulnerable woman, and when she started fighting back, they tried to kill her. The evidence is overwhelming. The defendants documented their own crimes. Justice demands that you hold them accountable. Crawford tried his best. The prosecution has painted my clients as monsters, but they're human beings who made mistakes, who had misunderstandings, who never intended the harm that occurred. Don't let emotion cloud your judgment. Consider reasonable doubt. But there was no reasonable doubt, not with that evidence. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, the forewoman looked directly at Marcus and Amanda, her expression stern. On the count of financial exploitation of an elderly person, how do you find? Guilty. On the count of forgery? Guilty. On the count of identity theft? Guilty. On the count of conspiracy to commit murder? Guilty. On the count of attempted murder? A long pause. The forewoman's voice was firm. Guilty. Amanda collapsed in tears. Marcus just sat there, staring straight ahead, like he couldn't process what was happening. Eleanor reached back and took my hand. Hers was shaking. Judge Holbrook set sentencing for 4 weeks out. The defendants will remain free on bail until that time. This court is adjourned. As we left the courtroom, reporters swarmed us, but Eleanor was composed. Justice was served today, she said simply. I hope this case sends a message that elder abuse will not be tolerated and that victims can fight back and win. Outside, Eleanor and I stood on the courthouse steps in the afternoon sun. She looked exhausted but triumphant. It's over, I said. Almost, she replied. Sentencing is still to come. But yes, the hardest part is over. I looked back at the courthouse where my son was being processed, where his future was being destroyed by his own choices. Part of me was devastated. Part of me felt like I'd failed him somehow. But mostly, I felt like justice had finally been served. And Eleanor, strong, resilient, unbreakable Eleanor, had proven that no one should underestimate a woman who spent her life fighting and winning. The night after the verdict, I sat alone in my condo and cried. Not for Marcus, or maybe partly for Marcus, for the little boy he'd been before he became the man who'd do something so monstrous. I cried for the loss of who I'd thought he was, for the illusion of the family I'd believed we had. Eleanor called around midnight. Are you okay? No, I admitted, but I will be. Are you? I'm sitting here with a glass of wine, looking at the city lights, and for the first time in 18 months, I feel safe. Her voice was quiet but steady. That's enough for now. 4 weeks later, we were back in court for sentencing. Judge Holbrook had reviewed the pre-sentencing reports, the victim impact statements, all the evidence presented at trial. Her face was stern as Marcus and Amanda stood before her. Mr. Morrison, Ms. Morrison, you have been convicted of some of the most egregious elder abuse crimes I've encountered in my 20 years on the bench. You systematically exploited a woman who loved you, who trusted you, who had supported you throughout your life. You stole her money, you isolated her, you tried to destroy her mentally and legally, and when those tactics failed, you attempted to murder her. Amanda was crying. Marcus stood rigid, emotionless. The court has considered your lack of prior criminal history, but the premeditation, the cruelty, and the complete absence of remorse demonstrated throughout this trial leave me no choice. Judge Holbrook looked directly at them. Marcus Morrison, you are sentenced to 20 years in state prison on the attempted murder charge, with sentences on the remaining counts to run concurrently. You will be eligible for parole after serving 15 years. Marcus's legs buckled. His attorney caught him. Amanda Morrison, you are sentenced to 18 years in state prison, eligible for parole after 12 years. Amanda's wails echoed through the courtroom. Her parents, sitting in the gallery, were sobbing. Additionally, Judge Holbrook continued, the court orders full restitution of $437,000 to Eleanor Whitmore, plus interest and damages. All assets currently held by the defendants are subject to seizure to satisfy this debt. She banged her gavel. This court is adjourned. I watched as they were led away in handcuffs. Marcus looked back at me once, his eyes pleading for something. Forgiveness, rescue, I don't know. I looked away. Eleanor stood beside me, dignified as always. It's done, she said quietly. How do you feel? Sad, relieved, vindicated. She took a deep breath. Mostly just tired. The civil case was resolved quickly after the criminal convictions. James negotiated the seizure of Marcus and Amanda's remaining assets, which wasn't much after legal fees. The house was foreclosed. Eleanor recovered about $60,000 immediately, with the rest to be paid through garnishment of any future earnings they might have after release. "I don't care about the money," Eleanor told me. "I just wanted them to face consequences." 3 months after the sentencing, Eleanor sold the Greenwich house. "Too many memories," she said. "Too much space for one person." She bought a beautiful 2-bedroom condo overlooking the water in a building with excellent security. "I'm done living in other people's homes," she told me as we unpacked boxes in her new place. "This is mine, just mine, and I'm going to live exactly how I want." She started volunteering with an elder advocacy organization, helping other elderly people recognize and escape abuse. She gave talks at senior centers about protecting yourself financially. She became a voice for people who felt powerless. 6 months later, I sat with Eleanor on her balcony, watching the sunset over the water. She looked healthier than I'd seen her in years. She'd regained the weight she'd lost. Her eyes were bright again. "I got a letter from Marcus," she said suddenly. I looked at her sharply. "What did it say?" "He's sorry. He never meant to hurt me. He was desperate. He made mistakes." She set down her wine glass. "Everything except actual accountability for what he did." "Are you going to respond?" "No. He doesn't want forgiveness or reconciliation. He wants me to feel bad enough to help him somehow, to maybe put money on his commissary account or hire a better lawyer for his appeal." She smiled sadly. "I'm done being used by people I love." I thought about my own relationship with Marcus. I'd visited him once in prison, 3 months after sentencing. He'd spent the entire 30-minute visit telling me how unfair the trial was, how Eleanor had manipulated everyone, how if I really loved him, I'd help him appeal. Not once did he apologize. Not once did he acknowledge what he'd done. I hadn't gone back. "Do you regret it?" I asked Eleanor. "Pressing charges? Testifying?" "Never. Not for 1 second." She looked at me seriously. "Kate, I'm 73 years old. I spent 40 years building a career, building financial security, building a life. I'll be damned if I let someone take that from me without fighting back, even if that someone is family." "Especially if that someone is family," I added. "Exactly." A year after the trial, I got a promotion. Executive Vice President with a significant raise. I'd worked through the pain, the shame of having raised someone capable of what Marcus did, the questions from colleagues and friends, but I'd survived it. Eleanor threw me a celebration dinner at her condo. Her, me, James, Dr. Chen, and a few close friends. We toasted to resilience, to justice, to second chances at life. "You know what I've learned?" Eleanor said, raising her glass. "I'm tougher than I thought I was, stronger than anyone gave me credit for, and I'm done letting anyone make me feel small or powerless." "Here's to powerful women," I said. "Here's to women who refuse to be victims," Dr. Chen added. We clinked glasses as the sun set over the water, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. I still think about Marcus sometimes, about the little boy who used to climb into my lap and tell me about his day, about the teenager who'd been so excited about his first car, about all the moments when I thought I was raising him right. I don't know where I went wrong. Maybe I didn't go wrong. Maybe some people just make choices that have nothing to do with how they were raised. What I do know is this. When I found Eleanor dying at the bottom of those stairs, I had a choice. Protect my son or protect an innocent woman. Choose blood or choose justice. I chose justice, and I'd make the same choice again. Eleanor is 74 now. She's planning a trip to Italy next month, something she's always wanted to do but kept putting off. She's living exactly the life she wants, surrounded by people who genuinely care about her, finally free from the people who tried to destroy her. As for me, I'm 53, I'm learning to forgive myself for not seeing the signs sooner. Learning to separate the son I loved from the criminal he became. Learning that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone face the consequences of their own choices. If you're watching this and you've ever been betrayed by family, I want you to know something. You're not alone. It's not your fault. And you have the right to protect yourself, even from people you love. Eleanor survived because she fought back, because she documented everything, because she refused to be a silent victim, and because when the moment came, she had people who believed her. If you're in a situation where someone is exploiting you, financially, emotionally, anyway, please reach out for help. Talk to a trusted friend. Contact Elder Protective Services. Call a lawyer. Don't wait until it's almost too late like Eleanor did. And if this story resonated with you, if it helped you in any way, please like and subscribe to this channel. Share your own story in the comments if you feel comfortable. You never know who might need to hear that they're not alone. I'm Catherine Morrison. I'm 53 years old. I had my only son convicted of trying to murder his grandmother, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Because some things are more important than blood. Things like justice, like dignity, like refusing to let predators win just because they're family. Eleanor taught me that, and it's a lesson I'll carry for the rest of my life. Thank you for listening to our story. Take care of yourselves. And take care of the elderly people in your lives. They deserve our protection, not our exploitation. Goodbye for now. And remember, you're stronger than you think you are.